Adobe Illustrator has 3 different methods for clipping images once you import a picture. For this exercise, we're going to explore all 3 different techniques that you can incorporate into your poster design. To get started with this exercise, you should have already created an 11 by 17 document that has an 1/8" bleed. Additionally, you should be using the swatches that we created in the last exercise. Before we get started, you should have downloaded the information packet for your tour poster. Inside of this folder, you'll find images for the venues, the textured background, and the instruments and band members. Returning to our document, the first thing we want to do is to create a mask to add a texture background for our poster. If we go to our Layers panel, I'm going to rename Layer 1 the background layer. Inside of this layer is where we'll just put our textured background. The first thing we want to do is to make our background a solid color. So I'm going to go over to my toolbox, find your rectangle tool, and then choose a color swatch that you think would look good for your background. Later on you can change it up. For me, I'm going to load up the orange color and then drag a rectangle that goes from your bleed edge to bleed edge. This will go off the page. Next, we want to place one of those textured images into our background design. So let's go to File and Place. My image is on the desktop under the texture background, and I've given you a variety of different textures to choose from, including this wall pattern, a watery splash, some wood grain, and a stone path. Now do notice that each one of these is already turned into a black and white image, so if you want to use your own picture, make sure to desaturate it before you place it in there. For me, I'm going to use the water splash. With this done, we'll do Place. And remember, it'll follow your cursor until you click and drag and place it into your design. We want this image to fill up the entire screen. So I'm going to use my Move tool to click on the image and drag it to the top. If you want, you can either rotate it or you can just stretch it out to fill out the entire area. Next, we want to incorporate this texture into the color of the background. To do this, locate your transparency panel. The transparency panel, as long as you have the image selected, you'll get a preview of what it looks like in the little box below. This panel will allow you to change your blending mode. If you change your blending mode to something different like multiply, you can see how it will start to pick up the colors that are below it. Other things like overlay will definitely pick up some of the more grayer areas, and this will also be in keeping with our color scheme. So choose a transparency blending mode that'll give you some interesting results that you're interested in. For me, I'm going to keep it as overlay. Now let's create our object's mask. Go to our toolbox and select your rectangle tool and set your fill color to be solid white. With this, you can click and drag a white rectangle anywhere on top of your textured background. Now let's choose our selection tool, the black arrow, and select both the white rectangle, hold down Shift, and the textured background. In your transparency panel, both of these should be visible in the little preview icon. With both of them selected, you can click on Make Mask, and you can see any area that was inside the white rectangle is now visible and everything else is masked off. Do make sure that Clip is checked on and that Invert Mask is unchecked. Now, as long as they're linked together, whenever you move one, the other will also move dependently with it. So if you want to make a change to your mask, if you want to edit it or move it around, click the link icon, this will unlink both of them, and make sure your mask area is selected. With this area selected, you can click on the mask and move it around, make changes to it, do whatever you want to it, even add to it, and it will only be affected for the mask and it will not affect the texture or the image below. What we want to do is to have some sort of pattern for your texture. In my case, I'm going to create some vertical stripes. For your poster, you don't have to do vertical stripes. You may do any kind of style or design that you want. But I'm going to take my rectangle and let's let them go all the way across my image. Make several copies of it. Your stripes can be different widths. So let's make a couple of copies. I'm holding down the Option key to quickly make that kind of copy. I'll select all of these, hold down Option, and let's drag them across. And there we have that. Notice again, in my preview area, this is what it looks like. As long as there's white, it will mask out the area for your textured background. The last thing we want to do is to be able to add some gradation. I don't want to see my texture all the way across my poster image. So I'm going to select all of my white area and let's add a gradient to it. I'm going to open up my gradient palette. And with the gradient palette, I'm going to turn on a simple black to white gradient. I'm then going to set my angle to be 90. Oops, let's actually do a negative 90. This way it'll put the black at the top. And you can see how it gradiates down to the bottom. I can further refine this by clicking and dragging the slider and either bringing it up, or let's bring the black area up so that it ends right about here. So that's how the first method of clipping an image is by creating an object clipping mask. I'm going to put my gradient and transparency panels back in order. Also, while I'm in my transparency, I'm going to select my image. Let's link it back together. Then we can go up to our layers and lock down the background layer. The second method of clipping an image is by simply removing the pixels in Photoshop. So in this case, we're going to use two different software. In our case, we want to work with one of the instruments in our information packet. If you open up the Instruments folder, select one of your instruments, and we're going to remove the white background around it. If I was to bring this image directly into Illustrator, the white would always be visible and be very difficult to clip out the complex shape. But this can quickly and easily be done using Photoshop. So select an instrument you want to work with and open it up in Adobe Photoshop. The first thing we need to do is to go to our Layers panel and convert our background layer into a Smart Object layer. So with background selected, click on the Layer options, choose Convert to Smart Object, and now that it's a Smart Object layer, any changes that we make can quickly and easily be undone and brought back to the original. Next, we're going to select all of the white pixels and mask them off. To quickly do this, locate the Magic Wand tool in the top of your toolbox. It may be hiding underneath the Quick Selection tool. But with the Magic Wand tool, we can go up to our options. Make sure your sampling size is turned to point sample. This will give us 1 point exactly where we click. We're going to keep our tolerance relatively low, about 10, and make sure continuous is checked on. Now, whenever we click in a white area, this will quickly and easily select just the white pixels that are all associated with each other, next to each other. However, if I zoom in, you'll notice that I've missed a couple of areas that were trapped inside of my instrument. For instance, this area right here is not selected. To add on to a selection, you can hold down Shift. This will give you your plus sign, and then when you click, it'll add on and add to that area. So take a moment to add on to any area that you have by holding down Shift and clicking. If you make a mistake, you can always do Command Z to undo. Also, if you need to erase away from an area, you can hold down the Option key, and that'll give you the minus, and that will subtract away from your selection. But for now, I'm just going to take a moment and click and add on to any bits that I see that I need to add. It may take multiple clicks to do this and a little bit of time, but take your time and make sure you're doing a good job getting any part that is necessary. Shift click, Shift click. Let's go back down to the bottom and get these parts too. Now that we've finished our selection, we can quickly turn on a layer mask by going to Layer, down to Layer Mask, and choose Hide Selection. This will hide all of the white pixels, leaving us just with our image by itself. Now comes the fun part. Let's change up the color and style of our image by applying some artistic filters to it. To get started on this, go to your Layers panel and make sure the image part of the layer is selected. We want to affect this image and not the mask. With that done, we can go up to our Swatches panel and let's add on those custom swatches that we created in the last exercise. To do this, go to your Swatch options, choose Load Swatches, And this is going to ask you to find that ASE file that we saved. So here's Ben's Custom Colors. We'll choose Append or Open, and this will append those colors to the end of your color swatches. Remember, these are grouped together in sets of 5, but they're all placed together for now, so you may have to pick and choose which color scheme that you want. For me, I'm using these first 5, so I'm going to stay within those color schemes. Now, the kind of filter that I want to use is going to be dependent on the foreground and background colors. If you look at the bottom of your toolbox, you can see my foreground and background are set to black and white. To change up these colors, you can simply click once on the icon, and this will bring up your color picker. In my case, it's for the foreground color. With this open, I can then click on any one of these swatches and select it. So I'm going to choose the yellow for my foreground. We'll say OK. With yellow selected, now let's choose a background color. Carefully click on the background swatch. Again, this will pick up a color picker. In this case, it's for the background color. And for mine, I'm going to choose this dark blue. We'll say OK to that. Remember, you can change up whatever color scheme you want for your design, and you can also change this up later on if you don't like the results that you're getting. But once you've got a foreground and background color selected, let's go up to the Filter drop-down menu and choose the Filter Gallery. With the Filter Gallery selected, make sure we're working in the Sketch drop-down menu. The sketch is the one that's going to depend on the foreground and background colors, and as you click on them, you can see it'll give you different ideas and different kind of styles to pick and choose from. You can further refine this style by selecting the different presets off to the right hand side, and this will give you some different results. For me, I like the one that's for photocopy. Once you get a style that you like, say OK, and that will apply it to the layer that you had selected. Check out your layers panel. Now we've got a smart filter for the filter gallery that's applied to this. Later on, if you want to go back and change up the style that you have, simply double click on the word Filter Gallery. This will bring up your Filter Gallery filter, and then you can start changing it up from here. I like what I have, so I'm just going to keep it as that. Now that we've finished with this, let's save this as a Photoshop document. We'll go to File, down to Save As. This time I'm going to do Jazz Sax Colored. And the format we're going to save it as will be a Photoshop document. This will make sure it saves as all the layers and also the transparency. We'll say OK, or save, and say OK to maximize compatibility. I can now close out my image, and let's jump back into Adobe Illustrator. In our Layers panel, let's create a new layer on top of the background layer. And inside of this layer, we'll go to File, down to Place, and let's locate that new Photoshop document that we created. Here's my Jazz Sax Colored. Since this is a large Photoshop document, I'm going to make sure Linked is checked on. This will save a copy of it outside of my document. We'll choose Place, and remember, it's going to follow your cursor until you click and drag and place it into your document. If you need to, you can scale it up. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And when you scale it, make sure you're holding down your Shift key to constrain your proportions so that it doesn't distort your image. In my case, I'm also going to rotate it so that it's nice and parallel with my overall page. Make it nice and large and off to the right-hand side. That's looking pretty good. Later on, you can go back and readjust and replace it depending on the instrument that you have and how you feel it would best fill up your page. So this is the second method of clipping an image. Open it into Photoshop and creating a layer mask to do that. Also, while you're in Photoshop, you can apply a filter that will give it a little bit more of an artistic feel. Once you've got something you like, let's go to File, and we'll save our document and continue on to the last method of clipping images. To do this, we're going to apply a clipping mask to our venue images. I'm going to work off to the right-hand side of my artboard. We'll go to File, down to Place, and locate the Venue Photos folder inside of your Poster Information folder. Select all 5 of the images. Make sure Link is unchecked so we can embed them, and choose Place. Remember, it's going to follow your cursor until you click and drag, and let's place all 5 of the different venues into here. For now, the size won't matter. Later on, we can go back and change it up to the size that we need it to be. Now, a clipping mask is going to be dependent on the shape or the object that's on top of what you want to mask off. So in our case, we're going to go to our shapes and choose the polygon tool. With the polygon tool, you can click and drag and it'll automatically create an equal-sided polygon. And here's a tip. If you hold down your mouse and use the up and down arrows, you can add or remove different sides to your polygon. In my case, I like a good 6-sided polygon, so I'm going to choose this one. And if I hold down Shift, I can constrain the rotation of it. Once you've got a polygon or a shape that you like created, simply place it on top of your image, and then I can scale it up to be whatever size I want it to be. Right now it doesn't have to necessarily cover the entire image. What I want to do is to make sure each of my polygon shapes are exactly the same size. So once I get one shape created, we'll select it and do Command C and V to copy that, or you can hold down the Option key with your selection tool and click and drag several of those. Once you've got a polygon on top of each of your images, I'm going to zoom into this first one. Select both your shape and your image that's below it. So in this case, I've got both of those selected. We'll go up to Object, down to the very bottom, choose Clipping Mask and choose Make. Notice that Command 7 is the keyboard shortcut. When you make it, now notice that your image is clipped inside of that overall top shape. Regardless the color of the shape that's on top, it'll always recognize that and then place it inside of it. Now if I want to make any edits to this image, you can see as I hover over it and even move it around, it'll still give me an idea of the outside edge. But if I wanted to scale down the size of my picture, all I have to do is double click on the image. This will go into isolation mode. Notice that at the very top I get my little layer pecking order, and I can click and move around my image. I can also change up the size of it, scale it down, and reposition it so that I can see my actual image that I want. Do be careful that you keep it inside, so in this case if you drag it off too much, it will kind of mask it off and completely clip it away. But let's make it a good size so that we can see everything inside of this. Once you're done editing this, you can either double click on the outside of it, and this will return you back to your normal editing mode. Let's do the same for the other ones. So I'm going to click and drag and select both my image and the shape that's on top of it. Go to Object, Clipping Mask, and Make, and this will clip it inside of here. From here I can double click on my image, this will go into isolation mode, then I can click on the picture and drag it down to resize it so I can easily see it a little bit better. Let's do the same for the other one. Double click to get outside of it, go down to the next one, select both the shape and the picture, Object, Clipping Mask, Make. You can then double click on the image and drag it till it's nicely evenly placed inside of your shape. You can then double click the empty area to go outside that and go to the next one. Select. Remember our keyboard shortcut of Command 7 will automatically do that one. I think this one's actually turned out pretty good, so we'll stick with that. And then select the last one, Command 7 will create that. You can then double click the inside of the shape and move it till you place it exactly where you want it to go. Then double click to go outside of that masked area. The best part about a clipping mask is that when you select them all at the same time, it'll act like this is one solid shape. So even if I was to increase it, everything that's inside of it will also scale up accordingly. And this really won't happen very easily if you're using a masked off area. The downside is everything has to be a hard edge. You cannot add any feathering or gradation to your edges. It must have this nice sharp hard edge. So the last thing we can do, now that we've got these done, let's place them into our design. I'm going to scale mine down. And I know my design, I want to place them off to this edge. And I'm going to line them up. We'll zoom in so I can see each one of them. We'll select all 5 of these to make sure they're evenly aligned and evenly spaced. Once I've got all 5 selected, I can choose the alignment tool, line them off to the left, and I can also choose the middle vertical distribution to distribute them nice and evenly as well. Once we're done with this, so this is the 3 different methods of clipping an image into Illustrator. You can either create a mask like we did for the background, You can clip the image in Photoshop and then import it, or you can use a clipping mask and place a object or a shape on top of your image and clip it that way. All three of these would be acceptable for using in your final poster design. For this one, we're going to save up our image, File and Save, and one of your exercise grades will come from the use of all three of these inside of this exercise poster.